Thursday, June 2nd. Okay, there we go. So we'll begin and call the meeting of the Beaverton City Traffic Commission to order. Today is Thursday, June 2nd, 2022. We begin with a roll call. So welcome, Commissioner Moore.
Present.
Commissioner Bobadilla.
Present.
Commissioner Urbanski.
Present.
Vice Chair McClean.
Present.
And welcome our newest Commissioner, Commissioner Buffum.
Present.
Thank you. And Chair Conway is present. Commissioner Miranda is absent but excused. So with that, then we will begin the meeting. Ms. Werner, are there any visitors who would, well, I guess first we'll say if you are a visitor and you would like to comment on something that is not on the agenda for TC 834, the speed zoning, or 835, the traffic calming ranking, we would invite you to raise your hand and Ms. Werner will reach out to you. This is a time for visitor comments from anyone in the community about any issue that is not on the agenda this evening. And it doesn't look like we have any. So with that in mind, then we will continue on. Thank you, everyone. And for those in the gallery, thank you for attending and being part of the process. We begin with staff comments, Mr. Khasho.
Mr. Chair, just for the record, we received 10 additional written testimony. One of them was on TC 835 and the other 9 were on TC 834. And those were mailed to you by email this morning.
Very good. Yes. Thank you. I saw those. Next up is the consent agenda, consent items. The only item that we have under consent is the meeting minutes from the April 7th, 2022 meeting, which is the last time we met. Since this is consent agenda, I would make a motion to approve as written, or sorry, to approve consent items.
I'll second that motion.
All right. So Chair Conway motion, Vice Chair McClean second. Begin with the roll call then. Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
We'll come back to Commissioner Moore. Commissioner Bobadilla.
Aye.
Commissioner Urbanski.
Aye.
Vice Chair McClean.
Aye.
Commissioner Buffum.
Aye. I think for Commissioner Buffum, since you were absent or not on the commission for last meeting, it's probably best to abstain that one.
Okay, abstain.
Thank you. We just need to get that into the book. And then Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
This is for the consent items of the meeting minutes
Yes,
from the last
I
time.
said aye.
I can
Oh,
hear you,
very-
Commissioner Moore. I can hear you fine.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. And then Chair Conway, aye. So motion passes 6-0 and 1 abstain. So thank you. Next up is the public hearing. We have 2 items on the portion, and let me grab my commissioner comments here. While I grab the opening chair, this one. This one. This one. All righty, thank you. Apologies for the delay on that part. All right, so before each public hearing, we have a statement of the chair at the opening. We're going to read this once in the interest of time. This will apply to both of our public hearings this evening. The Traffic Commission will now hold hearings on TC number 834 and 835 regarding speed zoning on Southwest Teal Boulevard between Murray Boulevard and Schultz Ferry Road and traffic calming rankings for 2022. The hearing will begin with a report from the city traffic engineer, followed by testimony from the person who submitted the proposal. City traffic engineer's report will list the applicable substantive criteria and the reasons behind the recommendation. We will then hear testimony from other interested parties. If you wish to testify, please clearly state your name and address when given permission to speak. On this time, please raise your hand. You will be called in the order that you are identified. Your evidence and testimony must be directed to the criteria in section 6.02.060 determined to be applicable by the city traffic engineer or other criteria, current city, metro, TriMet, state, or federal laws or policies which you believe apply to our decision. After the hearing is closed, the commission will deliberate on evidence received and make an oral decision to approve with conditions, or deny the proposal. The decision is not final until a written order is signed by the chairperson. All persons who testify will receive a written notice of the final decision of the commission. Decisions of the commission or recommendations to city council become effective upon approval by council. Typically, traffic commission recommendations appear in the consent agenda of the council and are approved by the council without discussion. City council ordinarily does not conduct a public hearing on such recommendations. Any decision of the commission may be appealed to city council. When an appeal is properly filed, a separate hearing will be scheduled before council. Any appeal must be filed with the city recorder within 10 days of the date of the traffic commission's final written order. Procedures related to written appeals are available from the office of our city traffic engineer and also the city recorder. With that in mind, and during the discussion, we ask that each person who does speak tonight limit their comments to 3 minutes, and we will give you a notification when your time is up. With that in mind, then, we will begin the public hearing portion for TC 834 speed zoning on Southwest Teal Boulevard between Murray Boulevard and Scholls Ferry Road. Process begins with a staff report. Mr. Khasho.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This request was from Mr. Andrew Eby. He requested the review of the posted speed limit on Southwest Teal Boulevard between 155th Avenue and Schultz Ferry Road. Mr. Eby indicated that a large number of pedestrians cross Teal Boulevard at several intersections within the area. He's concerned about the safety of pedestrians and drivers, as it takes longer for drivers to stop with the higher speeds, with the higher posted speed limit. Currently, the posted speed limit on Southwest Teal Boulevard is 35 miles per hour. The functional classification of the street is a 2 to 3 lane collector street. There are sidewalks and bike lanes on both sides of the street. The bike lanes have some gaps between Murray Boulevard and 152nd Avenue. There are 2 mid-block crosswalks, one on the west side at the West Side Trail, and the other one is at the Murray Schultz private drive, or a private street, which is close to Murray Boulevard. The area surrounding Southwest Teal Boulevard is mainly residential, except near the intersection with Murray Boulevard, where it is a mixed-use commercial and residential. To lower the posted speed limit, it is necessary for the Oregon Department of Transportation, ODOT, to investigate the speed zone and issue a new speed zone order. Per Oregon administrative rules, inside urban city limits, the measure 50th percentile speed, or the median speed, the functional classification of the roadway, the context and land use and density in the area, the crash history, the presence and type of pedestrian and bicycle fatalities, roadway geometry, side distance, design speed, and the amount of direct access are all considered by ODOT in conducting the engineering study to set the speed limit. So there is a bunch of elements that they need to take a look at before they decide what the speed should be. The engineering study must recommend a speed for a roadway that falls within a range of recommended speed listed by context and functional class. And these are set by statute. So for collector streets, the list includes the following. Urban core collector streets, typically they're posted between 20 and 25 miles per hour. Urban mix, which is downtown mixed use. Collector streets could be posted between 25 and 30 miles per hour. Suburban commercial or residential, it will be posted between 25 and 35 miles per hour. And suburban fringe for collectors, it is speed could be between 30 miles and 40 miles per hour. In February of this year, traffic and speed surveys were conducted on Teal Boulevard. The average daily traffic ranged between 3,600 vehicles to 5,200 vehicles per day. The measured 50th percentile speed ranged between 31 and 35 miles per hour. The measured 85th percentile speed ranged between 35 and 40 miles per hour. We have some historic data with the city, and the pre-COVID traffic and speed surveys from May 2017 showed that the average daily traffic on Teal Boulevard between Murray and Schultz Ferry ranged between 4,200 and 6,300 vehicles per day. The 85th percentile speed ranged between 36 and 39 miles per hour. So basically, there is almost 1,000 vehicle per day difference between pre-COVID and this time. And also the speed was kind of identical. There is a 1 mile difference. It all depends how the equipment is set. So you would expect there will be some changes. During the most recent 3 years of available crash data, that's between January 2018 and December 31st, 2020, 8 crashes were reported on Southwest Teal Boulevard between Murray and Schultz Ferry Road. Those were all over the place. There was not a concentration or a location of concentrated crashes. It appears the functional class and the context of Southwest Teal Boulevard falls between the state designation of urban mix and suburban residential with a recommended speed of 25 to 35 miles per hour. But based on the measured 50th percentile speed and the functional classification of the street and the context of the land use on Teal, staff is proposing to forward to the state a request for a speed zone investigation with a recommended speed of 30 miles per hour. So the issue tonight is just to forward a request to the state. The city cannot basically decide what the speed should be. We could recommend a speed to the state, and the state will review that speed and see if it meets the guidelines by statute, and then either they'll agree with us. Very seldom they will disagree. We are pretty close to what the statute says to be. So we're asking the commission tonight to approve the request for 30 miles per hour on Teal Boulevard between Murray and Schultz Ferry. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that before we begin, Mr. Khasho, we had a traffic calming review a couple of months ago, and during that time, some discussion had come up about the history behind that. Can you quickly go through an explanation of why there's a difference in how these speeds have ended up in different, couple of different roads have different speeds?
Yeah, it was the 155th Avenue that connects to Teal at the roundabout. Yeah, this posted speed there is 25 miles per hour.
Okay, and then up on the way, I believe to there's 20, 25, 30, and 35 in that area, and that's just because the way the development had begun. Is that correct?
Basically, yes, it was based on the land use at the time.
Okay.
So the 155th was basically posted 25 by statute, but Teal Boulevard, it's a three-lane collector street. So it's a little bit higher class than the 155th. So and at the time, the 85th, they used to set the speed limit based on the 85th percentile speed. And when that speed was set for Teal, the 85th was close probably to 35, and that's why it was set at 35. I mean, you look at the 85th percentile speed, which is current, it's almost 35 miles per hour, 35 to 40. So if the state want to base it on the previous criteria they used, they will keep it at 35. But since the statutes changed and it allowed ODOT to have more flexibility within city limits, so there is a big chance that they will approve the 30 miles per hour.
Excellent, thank you. All right, with that in mind, then we begin the public comment portion again. Limit any conversations to.
Oh,
3
Ernie, I
minutes.
think there
Oh,
might
I'm
be some-
sorry, you're right.
there
I
might
see
be
a
some
couple of
questions.
hands. My apologies there. I was getting way ahead. Commissioner Urbanski?
Yes, could you clarify, are we talking about imposing a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit on the whole of Teal, all the way from Murray to Scholls Ferry, or only from 155th at the roundabout to Scholls Ferry? 'Cause I'm
No,
getting signals here. Some people are only talking about the roundabout to Scholls. In other places, it looks like it's the whole road.
It's the whole road between Murray Boulevard and Schultz Ferry Road.
So although most of the people have been complaining about the section from the roundabout to Scholls, is that correct?
Correct. There was more complaints about the section between the roundabout and Schultz Ferry Road. But if you look at the rest of Teal Boulevard, there is 2 mid-block crosswalks at the West Side Trail, and also there is a apartment complex, a huge apartment complex in that area too. We did the review and we found that the speeds are kind of consistent, even probably it's slower at the lower end than the other side. So we're suggesting that we'll ask the state to review the whole section for 30 miles per hour.
Okay, thank you. Oh, maybe one other question. You know, you mentioned 8 crashes. Did any of those involve bicycles or pedestrians, or were they just vehicle and vehicle?
It was all vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I also believe, as a follow-up that, Commissioner Urbanski, that as I recall, I think one of the questions came up of if you needed to have the 51% of residents, that section of road actually had no residents. So I believe that was one of the struggles that came up with the traffic calming project that they had. And at that point, I think that was one of the reasons that it's probably inclusive of the entire section from Scholls to Murray. So, Mr. Khasho.
There are homes on both sides, at least the section between the roundabout and Schultz Ferry, but the homes, the back of the home basically is facing the street.
Correct. I was more, sorry, to clarify, I think the discussion that we'd had earlier was that it was all downhill between the roundabout and Murray, and there weren't traditional homes facing that as there typically would have been in another traffic calming when that came through. So I appreciate that we're kind of trying to be a little more holistic in that. Thank you. Are there other questions? And my apologies to Commissioner Urbanski for missing that one. I missed the hand completely. All right, seeing none, then we'll begin with our public comment portion. And Ms. Werner, is there speakers? All right, we'll begin in the order that your hand was raised and identified by Ms. Werner. And again, 3 minutes. Please state your name, address, whether you represent yourself or a group, and whether you for or against the item. Thank you.
First person is Andrew.
Andrew, thank you.
Good evening, Chair Conway. Thank you for your service, and I appreciate you and the commission considering this item tonight. My name is Andrew Abbey, AEBI, and I reside at 15845 Southwest Cardinal Loop. I am a board member of the Neighbors Southwest Neighborhood Advisory Committee, but I'm not speaking in a NAC capacity tonight. I am speaking in support of this speed limit reduction, and I'm specifically speaking in support of the speed limit reduction for the entire length of Teal Boulevard from Murray Boulevard to Scholls Ferry Road. I don't believe I have the ability to share a map with you, but I'm looking at a map in the background. Teal Boulevard is a very curvy street in many of the locations. So I think one thing that's important to consider is that when people drive, they tend to look straight ahead and they don't always track their eyes to an upcoming curvature in the road. And so there's sight distance issues with the geometry of the curves on Teal Boulevard. And as an example, the trail crosses Teal Boulevard between the traffic circle and Murray Boulevard. And you're not always expecting a pedestrian to cross there. And with that downhill slope, it can result in some pretty hard braking. So I think this is a good first step, but it's only a first step. The one thing that I would change about this would be to lower the speed limit to 25 miles an hour instead of 30 miles an hour. And I believe that medium to long term, I believe ODOT would be supportive of that, but I also recognize that you have to start somewhere. And I think this is a good place to start with a speed limit reduction to 30 miles an hour. If I recall correctly, the last speed limit reduction that the Traffic Commission deliberated upon was on Barrows Road. And within a few days of approving that speed limit reduction, there was a pedestrian fatality on Southwest Barrows Road. And I recall the deliberations that reducing the speed limit might not necessarily in and of itself make Barrows Road safer. But I think the Traffic Commission needs to be mindful that most responsible people do try to drive according to the posted speed limit. And, you know, if a pedestrian is hit at 40 miles an hour, that pedestrian only has a 10% chance of surviving the collision. In contrast, if a pedestrian is hit at 20 miles an hour, conversely, a pedestrian has a 90% chance of surviving the collision. So I do think this first step of adopting the speed limit is a good first step towards safety. I want to just briefly note two process remarks in closing, however. I do think this proposal could have been significantly improved with better outreach from staff. So the request to lower the speed limit went to staff on July 11th, 2020. We're now here 23 months later and finally considering this in front of the Traffic Commission. And the only way that this got considered was I finally submitted an online request, but nobody told me that after 18 months of trying to contact Public Works Engineering. Literally nobody directed me to the link on the website of here's where you go to submit the intake for the speed limit reduction. So I just had to stumble upon it. And once I stumbled upon it, then it was processed, and I appreciate that. But I think staff could do a better job of doing outreach when people contact Public Works with a request. Just simply send them an email and say, here's a link to the intake of how to propose something that'll eventually go before the Traffic Commission.
Excellent.
And
Thank you,
finally-
sir. I'd like to say your time is nearly up. You have a moment, and then again, you can take those up, and I would suggest you also bring that up with the City Council and point out the process to at the city level as well. So, did you have a final brief comment, sir?
Yeah, and then my other comment is, and this is similar to the discussion on Barrows Road, which is I think the speed limit reduction is only one of several components, and given the time limitations, I won't go into that. But ideally, there would be some other things that we could look at, such as marked crosswalks to further improve.
And please, I would encourage you to please submit then those, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Commissioner Urbanski?
Yes, you're in favor of reducing the speed limit not just to 30, but to 25 for the whole road. I'm sure you realize in downtown Portland, most of the areas are now 20 miles per hour. So would you also be in favor of making it 20 miles per hour at some point?
Thank you, Commissioner Urbanski. That's a really good question. I mean, that's certainly a possibility. But I think as was outlined in the staff presentation, ODOT typically for a neighborhood collector looks at 25 and 30 mile an hour speed limits. So notwithstanding the geometry in this location, I don't believe that ODOT would be supportive of going down to 20 miles an hour. And Beaverton, unlike Portland, does not have authority delegated to it by the state legislature to set its own speed limits independent of what ODOT's findings would be. But I would definitely support 25 miles an hour over 30 miles an hour, as I mentioned in my testimony. Thank you for that question.
Okay, because I'm trying to get a balance between the road users and the pedestrians. You know, pedestrians have their sidewalk and they've got trees to protect them from the cars. And then you've got 5,200 people driving on the road each day. So we're trying to get this mental balance between the needs of both groups. Okay, thank you.
Right, it's
Thank
just the pedestrians don't have any protection when they're crossing the street and they have a speeding vehicle. There's no marked crosswalks. And drivers aren't necessarily expecting a pedestrian to be there. So, ultimately people who drive vehicles don't want to hit a pedestrian. So this, in my mind, this is better for both pedestrians and people traveling through the neighborhood.
But if the crosswalk was better marked and with lights, would that take care of the issue from your perspective?
Well, I just think, given the topography of the area and again, the curves, I just find it amazing there's no marked crosswalks anywhere on Teal Boulevard between the roundabout and Schultz Ferry. And further, what I find even more amazing is that the roundabout at 155th is the only roundabout I have found anywhere that has stop signs. The reason it has stop signs is because the geometry is too wide of that roundabout. And so stop signs had to be put up to keep people from blowing through the stop signs because it's designed for a WB67 vehicle to travel through there. And if you look at other roundabouts, for example, over by Lewis and Clark College, they have a much smaller diameter going through the roundabout. So there's those physical cues to slow down traffic. So my larger concern is the speed limit is a great first step, but we really need to look at the civil engineering component of those other things that we could do to cue drivers to slow down and to stop for pedestrians. For example, at Nighthawk and Teal and Bob White and Teal, we really need to look at marked crosswalks and other amenities to improve traffic safety.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Next up, Ms. Warner.
Steve,
Steve, please begin when you're ready.
oh, wait, I hit the wrong button. Sorry. There you go.
All right. And Steve, you can begin. We do not hear you if you're on mute.
How about now?
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'm Steve Thompson. I live 11100 Southwest Partridge Loop, probably about a couple hundred feet from Nighthawk and Teal. And I lived here for about 19 years, and I've seen the traffic just increasing year after year. And with the expansion of the urban growth boundary west on Schultz Ferry, in recent years, I've seen a tremendous increase in traffic. And it seems that Teal has become just a shortcut from people going on from heading east on Schultz Ferry and wanting to go north on Murray, not serving the residents of the area, but a shortcut that to skirt around the intersections on Murray and Schultz Ferry was where traffic should be. So I think lowering the traffic speed limit, and I'd also support lowering it to 25 miles per hour to reduce the traffic volume and the speed. I see a lot more people on bicycles on Teal and a lot more pedestrians. Just people going back and forth from Progress Ridge, a lot more use on the trail under the power line. So, I would like to see the speed limit be as low as possible, 25, even speed bumps, so that Teal doesn't just become a shortcut for people avoiding lights and the major roads that were designed for that load of traffic.
Excellent.
So yeah, I strongly support the measure to 30, but I would recommend 25.
All right. Thank you. Are there any questions from Commission? All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Ms. Warner, next. That is it. That is everyone then. Excellent. All right. With that in mind, then we will close the public comment portion. I guess just as a follow-up comment to Andrew, we do in our packets receive maps, and also I believe that every commissioner typically visits on site for everything that's out there. So there's firsthand, and also in our packets, the city graciously provides as much information as they can. So that does include maps, data, all the public comments, and any information they feel that we would need for this. So thank you for considering that though in your testimony. Next portion then, we'll close that. Are there any staff comments, Mr. Khasho?
No comments, Mr. Chair.
Sorry?
No comments.
Okay, very good then. With that in mind then, Are there, we'll close the public hearing portion and begin commission deliberations. Are there any other questions, Mr. Khasho, though? All right, seeing none, are there any general comments? And then Vice Chair McClean?
Yeah, I'll just start off. I'm in favor of, 834 as written. I think it's a first step to forward the proposal to ODOT. I think like Mr. Khasho said, typically they do the same study that our traffic engineers have done. And based on the percentile of commuters going that speed limit, I think they would approve the 30. So I'd be in favor as written. I think, lowering the speed is not always the most popular decision for commuters, but I think it's the most safest option. And it definitely will improve safety along with maybe other calming aspects, but this is kind of a good first step.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Khasho, I guess one question when I look at some of the other written testimony, and I probably should have brought this up earlier. Some of the comments are outside of the scope of the speed limit. They're providing comments and input on something well outside of that. Once the, if the speed limit were the same as Barrows, reduced from 35 to 30, then the Teal would become eligible for traffic calming consideration by the neighborhood. At that point, would all of the comments and suggestions that are put in the public comments that we received, would those be considered or would those be eligible for that? Or is there anything outside of that that would be different?
First, the posted speed limit needs to be reduced by the state. And if
Right.
it does, then the street will qualify for the neighborhood traffic calming program. One thing we need to consider though, that Teal Boulevard probably is, I have to check, but I'm almost sure it is a primary emergency route. And it's a 3-lane, 2-lane, 3-lane collector streets. So based on these, under the eligibility criteria, it may not qualify for the traffic calming program. But that does not mean that there are devices that we can use to reduce the speed, such as speed radar signs. Those will be used where, on primary emergency routes, other things like curb extensions. So there is still possibility to have traffic calming on the street. But first, the speed needs to be 30 miles per hour or below that to qualify.
Correct. I think I think just in regards to the comments, what's going on, that the consideration here, as Vice Chair McClean noted, was the speed limit suggestion to ODOT only and not some of the other comments, which would come under a different purview, either traffic calming or perhaps outside of that. So I guess that's one of the things to make a distinction on as we go through that. Are there other comments though? Suggestions? You make a motion as well. Commissioner Urbanski?
Yeah, I have a hard time kind of reconciling the needs of the drivers and pedestrians or cyclists. Because ultimately you could say 15 miles per hour would be even safer, or 10 miles per hour, or ban the cars completely, and that'll be even safer. We have to face up to reality. There's always some kind of risk. But the accidents that we're seeing, the 8 accidents reported over the last few years, didn't involve any pedestrians. I think it's highly unlikely that a car will hit a pedestrian. I've been up that road a few times in the last few days, particularly from the roundabout to Schultz. The vehicle will hit a tree before it hits a pedestrian. If the pedestrian is on the sidewalk, there is a verge and the trees are very dense there. And if you hit a tree, it's not forgiving. So I can see a safety issue from the driver's point of view. Chop all the trees down if you want to increase safety. But obviously that's not what we're talking about here. I don't think there's a real threat to cyclists have a very wide lane. The road for the cars is a single lane, there's no overtaking, and it's curvy. So there's a disincentive, it's kind of a calming effect in itself. I do agree though, there is a real danger for the pedestrians when they're crossing where the power lines are, for example. The places where they cross, there are no lights there. I think that's much more important, regardless of what the speed is, that there should be some kind of illuminate, not the hawk lights, but the other ones, the rectangular rapid flashing ones, to protect the pedestrians there. That's the only place really where the pedestrians should be in the road. Otherwise, they've got their own lane. The bicyclists have their very wide lane and the cars have a relatively narrow lane. So just because we change a number on a speed sign, I don't think it's going to improve the safety whatsoever. And the people who are going to speed, people who are recklessly driving, they're going to continue to do that. So I just think this is like a magic thing. We change the number and the problem's gone away. I don't think that's going to be the most effective thing. I'm much more in favor of doing something more positive that will definitely have an effect, and that is installing some lights in those crossings. And as one of the people who submitted a written statement, they're in favor of removing the stop sign at the roundabout and making it a yield sign like most of the other roundabouts in Beaverton, because it's confusing to a lot of drivers. They come up there and then they have to slam on their brakes and possibly get rear-ended. Whereas in most cases, they simply have to look to the left and make sure there's nobody there and yield. So I'm not convinced that changing the speed from 35 to 30 is going to take care of the real problem. It's not going to really improve the safety of the pedestrians, because the only two places that they're really affected is when they're crossing the road, not when they're walking on the sidewalk. So I don't feel the drivers should be penalized for the whole road of Teal because of that. So I'm not in favor of it. Thank you.
Are you in favor of, just for a clarification, sir, are you in favor for a change of any of it, or you would leave it all at 35?
I would leave it at all 35, and I think we should do something else for that road. Like I say, to put lights at the crossings where the pedestrians are actually vulnerable. But when they're walking on the sidewalk and there's a wide grass verge with dense trees, I don't think they're at risk from cars there at all. The people in the cars that are at risk from hitting the tree.
Okay, and one other question, I guess, what about the continuity of the fact that you go through that entire neighborhood and I saw signs that said 25, 20, 25, 30, 35, because on one side of the roundabout it's 35, on the other side it was 30. Up the street it said private road at a cul-de-sac. Some roads have signs, some of them don't. What about the consideration of, does that play into it, that the fact that it's 35 at one point, and I think I could go along and then I get into a different part of the neighborhood and it's slower?
Well, my understanding is the whole of Teal is 35.
That's correct, but I'm talking about when you go through the roundabout over on the other side to 155th, I think it is.
Yeah, but those roads are completely different. They don't have the protection of the cycle lanes, the wide grass verge and the trees, and the pedestrians are a lot closer to the vehicles. So it's a different story there. But on Teal itself, and with the gentle curves on Teal, and the fact it's a single lane, you can't overtake on that road. So I think this is being overblown. I mean, if we apply it to this road, I think we need to apply it to probably 80% of the other roads in Beaverton.
Okay, interesting. All right, very good. I want to go back to Commissioner Moore, had a question or comment?
Yes, I've lived in that area. In my experience, there's not a concern that you're going to get hit when you're stopping at the stop sign. By the way, Commissioner Urbanski, I don't know if you encountered that, but I used to navigate that area practically daily. Just 3 or 4 years ago, I lived in that area. Never encountered speeding such that people were going to not know they needed to stop. And I think, to the point of the gentleman who proposed this, there is quite a bit, and maybe it was the other person who commented after him, there is quite a bit of traffic that goes through there to avoid being on the actual Scholls Ferry. And it does become a shortcut. And because of that, if there were a way to say local traffic only, I think what's happening, and this is what I wanted to address, Commissioner Urbanski, when we are going to address what they have proposed, and it's a matter of, does this work? And if we want to vote against it, we will. I get that we want to do something, but my concern is what these folks have already mentioned, that they've waited a while, over 23 months, to see something happen. And I'm curious as to whether or not the proposals that you even mentioned, Commissioner Urbanski, are something that engineering can do much more quickly than while we're waiting for the state to.
So you've gone quiet.
I talk with my hands and I muted myself. Sorry about that. I was concerned as to whether the proposal, the suggestions that you'd made, Commissioner Urbanski, were something that engineering could do without or having to actually wait for the state to make a determination. And then we've got another step to make these other changes that perhaps the neighborhood wants, but that may not actually fully address what the real problem is. I think that Commissioner Urbanski's points are valid. I'm concerned that when people make a proposal, it really helps them to see that something is going to happen and as rapidly as possible. So my concern is, Jabra, is there something such as what Commissioner Urbanski talked about that can be done? Is there budget for it that can happen much more quickly than while we're waiting for the state to say, oh yes, we can go down to 5 miles per hour and then you'll be eligible for these other things?
At this time, we don't have any item in the budget specifically for Teal Boulevard. We have some for other locations that it's identified to have rectangular rapid flashing beacons. But that doesn't mean we cannot look into finding some money or have a supplemental budget to have these elements in. Also, we have to review the locations where we are proposing these things. It's not just we go out, there's a crosswalk there and we will put one in. So there needs to be a need for it before we say we're going to put a flashing beacon. Yeah, there is a couple of marked crosswalks on Teal Boulevard, but those crosswalks are next to a median island. So the median island is an enhancement for the crosswalk. So that's why it works safely. When people cross, they could cross at 2 stages. They could cross to the middle and then cross, look again and cross again. So we have to consider all these things.
How is need determined? You mentioned that because of that median, that basically required that we have those crosswalks, the ones that are unmarked and that are considered the safety hazard. How would one go about determining the need? Would we send Mr. Shaw and company out there to take a look at it? What happens?
Yeah, I need to go back and, where typically those treatments first applied at mid-block crosswalks because it's unexpected where people will be crossing. Depending on the amount of traffic and the number of pedestrians too, there is a criteria that's set by the Federal Highway Administration, and every city use it as a guideline where you apply marked crosswalk with or without treatments. So we have to take a look at those. But then at intersections, regardless, the statutes, Oregon revised statute says, every intersection has a crosswalk, regardless it's marked or unmarked. So we have to also take a look at those. And we need to be specific, where people are crossing, where is the need is. We don't just go out and mark everything. And so it needs to be studied and take a deep look at it, and then we'll consider treatments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bobadilla?
Thank you. Tagging on to that, Mr. Khasho, I'm a little confused. The issue here is pedestrian safety. So if we're going to lower the speed limit, it's supposed to be because we're addressing the issue of pedestrian safety. I'm not really convinced that honestly that going to 30 is going to actually solve the real problem. I understand that the public brought this here to us and is telling us, hey, this is what I believe is the proper solution, is to lower the speed limit. I don't think necessarily they always know what's the best solution. Sometimes it just seems it's maybe the obvious solution, but not necessarily the right solution. I think what's being presented here is, yes, we have a problem here, and I am actually very familiar with that area. I don't think cyclists are a problem. I mean, some of the cyclists, and I've cycled through there too, you can actually just go as fast and pick up some speed there too. So I agree that it is a pedestrian problem. There needs to be better warning that where the crosswalks are at, where the pedestrians are crossing for the drivers. If it's drivers within the own neighborhood, you usually are familiar with it. I'm envisioning kind of like what Denny is happening. Denny, the speed limits has gotten lower over the time. We've got a lot of calming devices have been put there. But truthfully, what's happening now in Denny is terrible. I mean, that neighborhood is getting clogged up now with traffic being held back. And yes, because people are using it as a shortcut, that's a different problem. I mean, in the reality, I learned this from years ago, that the truth is that a lot of the locals aren't the ones that are using it, right, as a shortcut. It's the other people within the neighborhood that are coming to use it as a shortcut to get through there. I mean, it's a fact. It happens a lot, but I don't know if that's really what we want. So I'm a little bit torn here. I understand what the public wants, but I'm not really convinced that what is being presented here is going to provide the right solution. I would love to see signs being put out there as soon as we put, just like the yellow signs are warning pedestrians coming, or pedestrians ahead, so they know and become aware of it. I would love to see, yes, more type of a lighting or visionings that people are going to be crossing, and especially when it's dark around there. And I go by there often. Again, I'm very familiar with it. I've gone there. That you can, I know it sounds silly and ridiculous, but I work out very early, and I've run down there by 5 o'clock. And summer, it's wonderful. You can see it. Winter, it's dark. No one can see you. I mean, and people are walking their dogs there. That's just not but with my husband, that people are actually just walking their dogs around there, and you don't know. So I'd love to see more the right solution to help the public actually address what they want. I understand also Commissioner Moore stating that the public wanted something done over 23 months ago. And if we were not to approve it, it's going to delay and, trying to get a solution, but it may not necessarily delay it as long, because we might be able to come up with a better solution that could be implemented maybe even sooner. I'm still, I know I'm going in circles, I'm sorry, but I'm still puzzled. Like, I don't think we're really addressing the fundamental problem here by just lowering the speed limit. And then coming back maybe again later on in another year or something, saying now we need to lower it again. I didn't hear from the public or testimony or even that evidence presented here that actual pedestrians have been getting hurt, or the ones that have been hurt and injured here. So I need some help here.
One question, then we'll come back to Commissioner Buffum. And that's Commissioner Bobadilla. A question about the process, though. In your experience, or at least in mine, or I don't know, what do you think? It doesn't seem like there's a one-stop fix in situations of this nature, right? In the case of some of the other places we've seen where you've got an intersection, and you either, does the stop sign go, or does it stay in or come out? Is it a three-way stop or is it a four-way, right? Those seem pretty clear cut. But in cases like this, I think we're seeing more and more, it is not a one-stop solution. So is this one aspect and other things can be done? Or are you saying that, it feels like maybe are you after a piece? Because if we're not saying lower it to 20, but if you lower this, then that's one tool that you can use. You can also put up beacons, you can put up radar guns, you can review the piece of the intersection. I have a question about the roundabout to Mr. Khasho later on, but is that something that's possible? And this is like, I support this for now because this is one aspect, but this is not the only one. And they're not what's the word I'm looking for? Mutually inclusive, right? Everything can be done at a different time. So we can do this, and we can also say, okay, why aren't there flashiers at, when THPRD have a flashing beacon? If we have that in the budget, and we've done a couple of those this year already, is that the concern?
No, and actually, thank you for asking me for clarification, Chairman Conway. My concern is the following. The public has come here to say, the reason I want you to lower the speed limit from 35 or whatever is to 30 is because we have a concern for pedestrian safety. That is what I'm seeing here. It's pedestrian safety. I haven't heard anything of how the pedestrian here is the one that is being impacted by the present condition, really. Sounds as real as other people. The pedestrian safety here, I think, could even be addressed by much more simpler format, such as Commissioner Urbanski mentioned, lighting, other those. I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, and I want to hear from others, is that lowering it is really going to solve the real problem that I'm being told here is pedestrian safety. The only thing I'm seeing here from here is that so-called that because we are going to lower the speed limit from 35 to 30, the car can stop can stop quicker. That's what I mean, and that's what I'm going off of here, what I'm reading and what was provided. The cars can be able to stop faster, therefore that's going to protect the pedestrian by just lowering it. I understand the statistics that yes, that if you go, from 20 miles per hour to 30, I get that, but I don't think that's really solving the problem that they're wanting. I understand what you're mentioning, that that's going to be one step to get closer to what we want. I think it's more of a Band-Aid right now, what we're providing. I don't really think it's a real actual effective tool.
Okay, very, all right, thank you for that. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Commissioner Buffum?
Excuse me, and mine's just a comment. I've driven that road now 5 or 6 times over the last 2 weeks. I've never driven that road before. And coming down the hill off of 155th towards Murray felt dangerous to me. At 35, I set my speed to 35, and it came down around that corner and there were pedestrians there and I had to slam on my brakes. It felt unsafe, so I would be in favor of reducing it to 30. I'm less concerned, well, I'm concerned about the pedestrians, but the bicyclists sharing with the scooters, motorized scooters that I saw today, and the motorized bicycles going up and all sharing that small bicycle lane with the cars felt dangerous to me. I would like to see them slow down a little bit. So 30 miles an hour would be my favor.
Excellent. All right. Were there other Commissioner, Vice Chair McClean? Thank you.
Well, I just want to add a comment. I think it's great deliberations. There's a lot of great input. And I think I wanted to share some personal opinion. I think definitely if we could solve the problems, that'd be fantastic. I think like Commissioner Urbanski said, without banning vehicles, I don't think we're going to prevent, reckless drivers or, reckless activity. If a pedestrian's, crossing at night when it's dark, I don't think we can solve that. I think what my opinion is from the Traffic Commission is, can we improve conditions? Can we improve safety? By adding a marked crosswalk, by adding a flashing beacon, by lowering the speed, we make an existing roadway, an existing condition better than it was before. That's my expectation. If we can solve pedestrians getting struck by a car, I don't think that's something we can solve. So I think really, to go back to the Traffic Commission, guidelines and goals is improving safety, improving both, vehicle, pedestrian and bicycle, expected movement pathways, and also following the regulations. So I think, in my opinion, what I'm hearing from other commissioners, we agree we want to improve conditions. I don't know if it's realistic that we can solve every possible concern that the public comes, but if we can make improvements, I feel like we should definitely make those improvements when possible.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Urbanski?
I just think we've already solved the issue of pedestrian safety. There hasn't been an accident there in the records, right? Not with pedestrians. But also, this is a relatively new road. I mean, it's not like Denny, where I think most of us agree that speed limits there should be changed or lowered because it wasn't built for the kind of traffic we have nowadays. The road is narrow and pedestrians aren't protected from the cars as well. But this road, particularly from the roundabout to Scholls Ferry, you couldn't come up with a better road. I mean, there's plenty of room for pedestrians, protected from the cars. They shouldn't be in the road. You can't stop at, you know, if somebody wants to run into the road and get killed, they'll do it. So speed limit sign isn't going to do anything to that. There shouldn't be people in the road except where the crossroads, or where they're crossing right now. And that's where I think we should be focusing our effort. The other thing is, you know, we didn't read the comments that people sent in, but not everybody was in favor of this. Some of the residents were against it. And not only that, I've always felt a bit that the results are biased to some extent, because we put up the notices saying, you know, there's something going to happen on this street, you know, come to the public meeting. Now, the residents who are walking, they will read those notices, but people in cars, they're not going to read what's there. I mean, the print's too small. They have no idea what it's all about. So out of those 5,200 vehicles that go on that road every day, very few, if any, are going to take notice of what that sign says. So we're not really hearing from them. So we're getting a very biased opinion here from people who walk, people who can stop and actually read the sign and, you know, find out where to get the information on the website. So I'm trying to balance this all up, and I think this is not where we should be focusing our attention, because I don't think it's going to solve the problem of safety. And like I say, I think we need to focus on where the pedestrians are in the road, not where they're already protected. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
So one question, Commissioner Urbanski, if I may, then the theme then of people saying pedestrian safety, they've cited that at Barrows as well. Is there do you feel then it's a perception of someone thinks that the pedestrians, there's been no accidents. So what's the reasoning then that someone would say, I'm concerned and fearful for pedestrian? Is there a different motivation then, do you feel? Because as Vice Chair McClean said, the purpose, I think, is to try and improve the situation. And it's not always it's not a one-stop solution, but it also doesn't feel like it's a one issue.
I think it's just an easy target, but I don't think it's the right target. I was looking at the NHTSA report, the fatalities for 21, and there's been a lot more fatalities in the last few years, but speeding didn't go up. That wasn't the main cause for a lot of these things. It's things like pedestrians were contributing. There was, you know, some people decide to commit suicide that way. Alcohol, you know, there are lots of things. Distracted driving is a big one. You know, if we're talking about pedestrian safety, just saying speed limit is that, yeah, we're going to solve it by just changing 35 to 30. I think that's just too simplistic. I think we need to address what the real problems are and come up with solutions. And I just don't think going from 35 to 30 is the answer.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I have one follow-up, Mr. Khasho, in this discussion. And I guess it's a general question, maybe of the commission as well. The situation, and I go back to Commission Vice Chair McClean's comment about improving the situation and leaving this better than we found it. Is the city empowered, or does the commission need to take a better, firmer approach on issues as they change? The speed limits throughout the area in this neighborhood, and we had the traffic calming question, and that also came up at different points, was because as you noted, the land use was different at the time. When the road went through, there was nothing there. Then we become to get more traffic, we become to get more homes. That roundabout is enormous. It is meant for a 2-lane, massive amounts of traffic. That is really a 2-lane roundabout in every sense of the word. But the new one that they're going to put in on Allen and 92nd, that is designed to slow traffic by creating a smaller radius. And it's going to be, as we were told, a gateway to Beaverton. Who would do something about reducing the size of that roundabout so that it matches the other roundabouts in the area? There's the one at Barrows, and so that they're all uniform. They do the same thing. One of them doesn't have stop signs. They have stop signs here. That's just huge. It's just, I could see people just driving straight on through. It's so wide you couldn't see somebody else coming. is that something that's a purview of the city or the traffic engineer? Or does that need to come before traffic commission? What?
Yeah. First, let me go through the history of that roundabout. This roundabout was built in the 80s. And if you compare it to what's going to be built on Allen 92nd or the one on Barrows at Rorschach, those are called modern roundabout. You know, in the United States, in the 80s, even early 90s, there wasn't that, especially in our area here, there wasn't much roundabout or even research about roundabout. It was all traffic signals. Anytime you have an intersection, they'll add a traffic signal. This location was a unique location where they added the roundabout. And at one time, that roundabout had yield control on it. But then it was late 90s where the homeowners association requested to change the yield to stop control because people were not stopping to pedestrians or yielding to pedestrian at the time. Even there were some people with four-wheel drives that they will go over the roundabout and get on the other side, go straight. It was done in purpose at the time. So the traffic commission then and the traffic engineer then basically decided to have always stop on it. We get sometimes requests to change it back to yield. And what we like to see is some support from the neighborhood or the homeowners association saying, yeah, we're okay, we would like it to go back to yield control. And the minute I mention this to anybody, basically they say, you know, it becomes just one person opinion on it. Even within the written testimony, and some people are asking, why don't you take the always stop and make it yield too? Because people are saying now drivers are running the stop sign because to be honest, it's not normal to have a roundabout this big and have a stop control on it. But yeah, it is big, but with the stop control, the problem is not the roundabout or people are going fast within the roundabout. I mean, they're coming to a stop. Even if they roll through the stop sign, they're going at a slow speed. So the roundabout itself and the stop control on it, it's not the problem. I mean, yeah, you change the stop to yield control. I'm sure the speeds will pick up a little bit. And so this is the dilemma with this roundabout. Yeah, the design of it, it's old design, it's big, but to change it to a modern roundabout or even a standard intersection, this will take quite a bit of money to change it. And at this time, it's not identified anywhere that there is a safety problem to take it out and change it. And is there a need to change it? There is other priorities within the city that there is more need for safety and other improvements too. Sometimes it's a perception too. We have to keep this in mind.
Okay, thank you. So since I asked the question, then a follow-up on that, and with that in mind, then none of the other suggestions or solutions were actually viable, or what's as Commissioner Urbanski said, it didn't seem like this is the right solution, but nothing else has been done in 23 months. So what is the solution then? If to Commissioner Urbanski's point, this isn't we're solving the wrong problem, and to Commissioner Bobadilla's point, it's been 23 months, and Vice Chair McClean, we need to improve this somehow. What are the options then? Is this the only option?
You have to be specific about what you're looking for. You know, truly, is there a problem? Is there a problem area or a location where it has a serious problem that needs to be solved at this time? That can be done. But here, all the solutions or ideas it's very generalized and it's all over.
Oh.
So we could be more specific. I mean, like I said, there is 2 mid-block crosswalks. They are marked, there are signs. The street has lighting all the way through.
Okay, so I guess then to Commissioner Urbanski's point, what is being solved? There is the fact that the city is recommending that the commission discuss and deliberate on lowering the speed limit because of a pedestrian issue then indicates that there is a pedestrian issue in the city's eyes.
But you're just here also generalizing that the city does not agree with there are pedestrian issues in the city, or please be specific when you mention these things. Where exactly, where at, what happened?
Okay, and I might need Commissioner, whoops, I'm in the wrong, Commissioner Urbanski then to comment in. The issue he said was they're concerned about pedestrian safety, but there apparently were no indications that pedestrian safety has been a concern. Close calls, accidents, all the accidents didn't involve people. Flashing beacon at all the other THPRD situations seems to be sufficient. We don't slow the speeds on Hart where it crosses the power line. We don't reduce the speed in the on Schultz, well, it goes under Schultz, I guess, or some of the other roads, I guess, where there's a crossing of a THPRD line. So I guess the question then maybe is, what's being solved? Or Commissioner Urbanski, help me if I'm not understanding. I'm just trying to understand. I'm trying to balance the point of things like to mine, and Commissioner Bobadilla, I see the hand. So I'll let Commissioner Urbanski answer, and then we'll go to Vice Chair McClean and then Commissioner Bobadilla.
My basic point is that for most of that road, I think the pedestrians are protected very well from the vehicles. They're separated not only by a bicycle lane, a grass verge with trees and a wide sidewalk. There's no reason for them to be anywhere near the cars, and the trees are providing basically a barrier, because if a car goes off the road for whatever reason, alcohol, distracted driving, they'll hit a tree, not the pedestrian. But there are a couple of places where the pedestrians are going to be in the road, and it's at the crossings. And I can't remember how many of those crossings have lights, or is my understanding that none of them have lights? Is that correct?
Correct.
I'm suggesting, particularly the one where the power lines cross the road, and maybe lower down the hill where, some traffic could pick up speed, regardless of what the speed limit is, you're going to pick up some speed. That would be a place to put lighted pedestrian crossings, with the rapid flashing lights. And I think that would do a much better job in protecting the pedestrians, which is the primary reason of this, and it wouldn't upset the drivers, because there are 5,200 or up to 5,200 people using that road. And I think it's an inconvenience, and we've not really heard from them, but I think it's an inconvenience, and somebody has to stand up and hear their side of the story. So I think we need to focus where the problem is, and I don't think it's for the whole road.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Vice Chair McClean.
Yeah, I think I just want to kind of rephrase what you were asking, Chair Conway. How did the traffic engineer come to the conclusion to make this recommendation, if I'm understanding correctly? I think based on what he said, we've had, especially in the Teal, Murray Hill area boroughs, we've had a lot of community outreach about improving safety. I think also the legislator change about the 85th percentile to the 50th percentile gives the traffic engineer, you can correct me, Mr. Khasho, if I'm incorrect, better options to say, hey, you know what, in the past, we didn't have the option to reduce speed. We do now. And there's a viable opportunity for improvement. And I agree, we have crosswalks. If we could have flashing lights and, beacons and, your flashing speed, slow down type of signs everywhere, of course, those things are going to help manage driver behavior. I think, Commissioner Urbanski makes a good point that, the people that commute may not be aware of these type of issues brought before the traffic commission, but also I think using the data, 50% of the people that are driving that street are driving under the speed limit. that makes me think half of the people are probably not going to be upset that we lower it from 35 to 30. I think using that data makes more informed decisions. I think it's really difficult to do anecdotal type of examples. Say, you know, in this situation, this could happen, this situation, this could happen. And again, I think we need to be realistic with our expectations. We're not preventing reckless driver, reckless behavior. We're improving a roadway. I just don't see any negative reason to slow it. I think people that commute, if they don't obey by the speed limit, but most people do, going 5 miles an hour or less for, you know, half a mile or a mile is not going to impact their commute. It's not going to be like, oh man, I got to leave the house 2 minutes earlier now to get to work. Like, I just really don't see the impact. I do see a definite viable improvement to the roadway. And then like Mr. Khasho said, having it lower also opens other doors. I really personally just don't understand the concern of why we can't lower speeds. Like, that's the whole reason legislature changed that 85th to 50 percentile. It's to give cities more opportunity to lower speeds where they think it's appropriate. So that, I think that's the conclusion I came to.
Excellent, thank you. And I appreciate you reiterating that and articulating that in a different manner. So thank you. Commissioner Bobadilla, and then Commissioner Urbanski will come back.
I have a comment and a question. Well, first of all, I don't think that lowering the speed limit is just, the evidence has been shown here already. Drivers are already driving under the speed limit without us telling them to drive slower, and it's not solving the problem. We still so-called have a pedestrian problem. How does by actually putting it officially in a sign make it solve it? It seems like they're already doing it. My question is for Mr. Khasho here. Does the city of Beaverton believe there is a pedestrian issue here? Yes or no? Just, does it? I understand what the public thinks there is, but I want to know, based on that, does the city of Beaverton believe there is a pedestrian problem in this area? Safety problem?
I don't believe there is a pedestrian problem. But also, you have to keep in mind, there is rules and laws that drivers and pedestrians used to follow too. And based on the data we have, it doesn't appear there is a pedestrian problem.
So what's been proposed here is because the public in that area, the community believes there's a perception that there is a pedestrian problem, and this is the solution that they provided. Is that right? Or they proposed?
So I cannot judge, is this a perception or something they experience? Sometimes people have one encounter that a driver does not yield. They feel endangered, and it becomes a big deal too.
I understand. Thank you. That helps me. Thank you.
So you have to keep all these things in mind. And also we have, before we get deep into things too, and saying why the street was posted 35 miles per hour. The street was designed for that speed. The street has a functional class as a collector street. And what does collector streets does? It brings traffic from local streets, from neighborhood routes, from the sides, and it funnels it to arterials. Basically, Teal Boulevard takes you to Schultz Ferry. It brings all these neighborhoods from the north and the south of Teal, and it takes it to Murray Boulevard, or it takes it to Schultz Ferry. There are no direct access to it from any homes. So it's designed to function this way.
Thank you.
But
That helps.
Yes, people walk on the sidewalks, people cross the street. And
that helps me a lot, understand where we're going there and our goals and our job and what it is. And I also feel the important, like in other situations we've had, it's also important for the traffic commission here to remember, we've actually had pedestrians, that say, I walk here, this is a problem, this is why I feel it's a safety concern and all that. We don't have that here today at all. So just want to remember that, us to also recognize that. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
But I want to mention too that with the lower speed, if actually drivers drive at a lower speed, pedestrian feels more comfortable to cross and walk too. I mean, you have to look at it both sides. But the key is, you lower the speed drastically, there will not be any compliance. And let's just be honest about it and be real about it. If you do it within reason, it could be achievable with enforcement. If you don't have enforcement, it will work 50-50 basically. We still have the 50th percentile, 50% of the drivers driving at below, the rest are driving above. So if you don't have these two elements working together, it's really tough to just post the speed limit and say, hey, everybody's gonna drive this.
Thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I appreciate Commissioner Bobadilla. I appreciate that thought that I want to point out one comment you made about, sorry about that. There's no sorry in this situation. I think there's an interesting dialogue and conversation that I think sometimes we have not had. I think it's an excellent conversation because I think that the issue that we're facing as an entire commission is twofold. And I think Commissioner Vice Chair McClean had brought that up before. We can't build our way out of this. We can't build our way out of roads. So somewhere we have to come up with solutions, and there is something that is said for doing something at a uniform approach or setting some sort of precedent that we can say this is what works and hasn't worked when we've done this and this and this. In some cases we lowered the speed. That doesn't mean that we maybe should always, and that's not the best solution. Just because we have doesn't mean that it has been successful. I think that's one of the shortcomings that we have, is we don't always hear back unless we go out and visit it ourselves. So thank you for those comments.
But I might add just on that, Chairman, and more importantly, not because we've done it in one area means that we should be doing it in another, and that it will automatically be the right thing to do in another. I think that's so important for the community to also know, in our city and people.
Correct. Thank you. Commissioner Urbanski?
Yeah, I don't think that we can say there are no negative consequences from the perspective of the driver just because we've lowered the speed limit. And I'll give you an extreme example. If you've driven down through downtown Portland where the speed limit is 20 miles per hour, even in the residential area, you spend a lot more time now looking at your speedometer than you did before, because you don't want to get a speeding ticket. And so instead of looking out for children in the street, looking out for cars so you don't rear end them, you're spending less time looking at the road and seeing what's around you, and you're spending more time looking at your speedometer. So I think the same thing can happen here. You lower the speed limit, people don't want to get a speeding ticket. They're going to be looking at their speedometer a lot more than they're doing right now. You can say, well, it's good that they're doing that. But we've had 8 accidents in the last 3 years between cars, not between pedestrians. So I would predict that lowering the speed limit, even by 5 miles per hour, will increase, or I should say decrease, the safety of the vehicles. And it'll do nothing to protect pedestrians. But it could actually increase the number of accidents, particularly down by Safeway, down that part of Teal, where, people need to be looking at what's going on because there are quite a few junctions there and not looking at their speedometer. So I just wanted to make that point. I don't agree that there's no negative impact from lowering the speed limit. There are potential detrimental effects as well.
Thank you. Are there other comments? All right.
I think I think it's time to vote. I'm going to make a motion to approve TC 834 as written. Let's just have a vote.
And I'll go ahead and second that.
All right. Motion made by Vice Chair McClean, second by Commissioner Buffum. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any final discussion? All right, that in mind, then roll call. Commissioner Moore?
We didn't hear
Commissioner
you.
Moore?
Nay.
Nay?
Nay.
Very good. Commissioner Bobadilla?
Nay, now want it for the record that to me, there's no evidence that was presented that there is an actual pedestrian safety issue. Even the city of Beaverton does not believe there is one from what I'm understanding here also.
Thank you. Commissioner Urbanski,
Nay.
Vice Chair McClean,
Yes.
Commissioner Buffum,
Yes.
and Chair Conway. This is one of the tougher decisions. I don't believe that the issue, nay, I think there's some other things that need to be done. Hang on then, I gotta, we won. Are we 3-3?
No, it's 4-2. Motion
4-2.
fails 4-2. I think
There you
it was a good discussion.
Thank you. As a follow-up then, I would ask that, I'm sorry, Ms. Warner, do you need a split count on that? Do we need a, okay, very good. I want to make sure we do all our paperwork. Thank you. And I appreciate everyone taking part in that. Excellent discussion. I would ask though, Mr. Khasho, can we have a summation of the recommendations that, or the questions, suggestions, or comments made in the testimony outside of the speed be kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of collected and identified as, is this something that needs a piece? I know that the city and we've mentioned that putting in a crosswalk is gives pedestrians a false sense of security. This is a collector street. It doesn't have any traffic signals on it. So it's treated as a high speed, I guess, in the sense of there's no stop signs. So is there other options that beacons at certain points, speed radars, any of those?
Yes, potentially there is. We have to review all the testimony received to see what was pinpointed to look at, and we'll review those. We will also take a look at the existing crosswalks, like at the West Side Trail and the other crosswalk by the shopping center, to see does it qualify for rectangular rapid flashing beacons. These are options. There is already marked crosswalks there, so that one will just need to justify the beacon and the funding. It doesn't need, a review by the Traffic Commission because the crosswalk is already there.
Okay, thank you. I would be very interested in recount or recap of that and that information, because I think it came up that it was kind of clear that it's a little unclear what the solution, what the issue actually is, and if we can identify some of the things that can and can't be done in this 23-month period of waiting, it would really help, I think, for us to be able to take some action, respond, because even though we've just denied this motion, that doesn't mean that we cannot address and continue to address the issues that are out there.
Also, this is not the end of the issue. The Traffic Commission decision could be appealed to the City Council.
That is true too.
And when this item is scheduled before the City Council, even within, what we will do is we will send out a decision notice of the Traffic Commission. And in the notice, it says that this decision could be appealed within 10 days from the time it's signed. So 10 days from today, an appeal could be submitted to the city to appeal the Traffic Commission decision to council. But there needs to be, they need to contact me, and there is, in the code, there is a criteria how do you respond to these things. Why is it appealed? And you have to list the reasons why it needs to be appealed. And who knows what will happen at the City Council meeting. City Council could also hold their own de novo hearing, and they could bring new evidence to the issue and they could take action. Other things they could do, they may say, hey, remand this issue to the Traffic Commission and reconsider. It could happen. I can't predict what will happen, but that it didn't close here at this point. It's still open.
Okay, correct.
for
Thank
an
you.
appeal.
Thank you for that clarification. I think in the interim though, given the 23 months, I would still like to see a recap of the previous information and suggestions, recommendations, so that we can, the ones that, so we know that we can do a follow-up. I think at the very least we should be doing that in tandem, because regardless of what goes on, if we'd approved this and it went to ODOT, it would still be 6 to 9 months. We could still do exactly what we're doing today, right now, regardless of what's going on in either way.
Also, the 23 months needs to be verified. So we need to dig in our records to
Right.
verify these things too.
Thank you. All right. Very good. Then with that in mind, then we'll continue to the next public hearing, which is 835, the traffic calming rankings for 2022. Mr. Khasho.
Under the city's adopted traffic calming procedures, each year the Traffic Commission considers the ranking for eligible traffic calming projects for funding. To be eligible, projects must meet the established eligibility criteria, and the neighborhood must demonstrate that at least 51% of residents and businesses in the neighborhood wants the city to consider a traffic calming for their street. This hearing also on the project ranking, it's time with this hearing for the commission to hear any appeals of the city traffic engineer's determination of eligibility. The office did not receive any appeals, but anybody from the audience could appeal the traffic engineer decision by speaking up and requesting or basically bringing up the issue of why they were rejected, and it should be considered at this hearing too. The city has received 12 requests from residents to consider traffic calming program on their streets. And there is an attached list with all these 12 locations. All 12 locations were evaluated against the eligibility criteria, and only 3 neighborhoods were found eligible for the program. This includes Southwest 141st Avenue between 6th Street and Allen Boulevard, Southwest 22nd Street between Murray Boulevard and Highland Way, and Southwest Davies Road between Allen Boulevard and Murray Boulevard. Due to the pandemic, instead of the applicants collecting signatures, the city conducted the petition by mail. Petition cards were sent to residents in the project area for all 3 eligible neighborhoods. After 3 attempts to mail the petition cards to residents who have not returned their cards, staff reviewed the return petitions and confirmed that Southwest 141st Avenue and Southwest 22nd Avenue Street were successful and met the requirement for the 51% neighborhood support. Staff is asking the commission to adopt the attached ranking list, which is shown in table 1. And the table shows Southwest 22nd Street, Southwest 141st Avenue, and also to consider Southwest Duncan Lane. Duncan Lane has been on the list since 2018. It never ranked too high, but this year we only have 3 projects on the list, and we believe we can fund all 3 and move forward with it. So we're asking the commission tonight to approve the 3 projects on that list. But I just want to make a comment about the attempts to get the cards back. First, we sent the 100% batch, which included all the addresses within the project area. And we gave 3 weeks for the cards to get back. And none of them, basically, out of the 3 projects, none of them made the 51%. So we looked through the addresses and we picked the addresses that they did not return their cards, and we sent it again. We did this twice. So we did every effort every effort we can do to get those petition cards back. Only 2 out of 3 made it. And with that, we're asking the commission for approval of the ranking list.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. All right. With that in mind, we would open the public hearing portion. Ms. Warner, are there anyone wishing to testify? All right. With that in mind, then we will close that. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
We got one.
Okay, very good.
Okay, this is John.
All right. As you go, sir, when you're ready.
Good evening. My name is John, last name Gosch, G-O-S-C-H. I'm trying to spearhead the 22nd Avenue speed bumps and reducing the speed on this street. I've lived here over 20 years now, and the speeding is just getting worse and worse. They use 22nd Street as a bypass so they don't have to go on Allen. So they come down Valley to Highland, they turn. In the middle of the night or almost any time of the day, you'll see them running the stop signs. And the traffic division has been out there doing their thing that they're supposed to do. And they find most of the speeders are doing 45 in a 25-mile-an-hour zone, mostly during the day. It's nonstop sometimes from 5 to 6 o'clock. They're just going by. They don't care what speed it is. They don't care about the pedestrians. They don't care about the animals. The children can't play on the streets anymore like they used to do. And we also bring up the part about Portland. I work in downtown Portland. I drive Killingsworth every morning. There's not a police officer down there. Those guys, it's set for 30 miles an hour. Those guys are doing 50 miles an hour. I know it's not something you guys want to think about, but the side streets are 20 miles an hour. They also have local, traffic signs up, just allowing for the local traffic residents to drive that area. That is something I'd like to see also, and maybe where your streets come in like Peach and 22nd, do a roundabout, make these people stop. We don't have a lot of accidents, but we had one here in the last several years, ran the stop sign, landed in somebody's yard. There's neighbors, most of the neighbors here that I spoke to are in favor of it. I've had 2 neighbors now in the last 30 days move out. They can't deal with it. You can't call the officers because the officers are too busy. It's not a 911 call. It is, we'll call, you call them, you try to identify who they are, nothing ever happens. Nothing happens. You'll see a police officer here, but then you won't see any traffic for like 10 minutes afterwards. So they know when the officers are here. So I'm asking that we get speed bumps, roundabouts, whatever it takes to slow this traffic down. And
okay, and one clarification, sir. This is not a decision on how to solution that. This is a ranking of this. You're basically asking to affirm that your selection currently ranked #1 remain #1.
Yes.
Now, how that solution is implemented and what that solution is, that does not necessitate that there will be speed bumps or that there will be whatever. It's going to be a joint decision by that community, and it may or may not actually come to a dead. But so I want to be clear that you're asking just that we maintain the rankings as suggested by the city and the surveys that were done.
Yes.
Correct? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and anything we can do to get the speeders to slow down.
Correct. That is a different dialogue, but for right now, the rankings. So I appreciate your comments on that because you are in the #1 spot right now. So it doesn't sound like anybody else is going to comment. So there we have it. All right, thank you. You bet. All right, Ms. Warner, was there any other comments? Okay, with that in mind, then we would close the public comment portion. Oh, there is a question, Mr. Khasho, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just want to explain that there will be a next step to do the project design. Just want to clarify that we will be holding public meetings, meeting with the neighborhood to work on a plan for the street. Basically, we work with the neighbors to see what options they would like to see on the street, and we'll come up with the plan. So this will be the next step, just for clarification for Mr. Gosh.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Any other comments, questions? That in mind, then we close the public hearing portion and have any deliberations or comments by commission. I do appreciate all the, I think this is one of the things that the commission sees that and the community glances at with a page and they see some numbers, and I don't believe that anybody really understands or appreciates how much work it is trying to get community involvement for items that are outside of their area. And even when they're in their area, it's still not the same. So I'd like to commend staff for being diligent in pursuing that, because I know that Mr. Khasho and several of the city staff have gone out of their way to try and get the correct number and required number of voting and identifications and results and any kind of information or any. Appreciate, commend that. Anyone else?
I'll make a quick comment. I think based on Mr. Khasho's statement that all three traffic calming rankings will proceed with the traffic calming program. We're not eliminating anyone. We're not, there's not four and we're picking the top three, all three. I'm fine with how the scoring was just determined by the traffic engineers team. And I'd be in favor of approving it because all three will eventually get go through the traffic calming program. It's just the order of the three that we're deciding.
Exactly. Thank you. That in mind, then I would make a motion to approve as written TC 835 traffic calming rankings for 2022. Commissioner Moore.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Moore. Motion's been made and second. Any final discussion? Thank you. Seeing none, then roll call. Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Bobadilla.
Aye.
Commissioner Urbanski.
Aye.
Commissioner McClean, Vice Chair McClean.
Aye.
Commissioner Buffum.
Aye.
And then Chair Conway, aye. So that motion passes 6-0 with 6-0. Thank you. All right. Next up then, Mr. Khasho, are there any old business follow-ups?
We have a presentation.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I missed that. Roll
Yeah.
right on over that part. I'm on the wrong page there. So with that in mind, then a presentation for the Go Beaverton. That's correct. I had a, thank you. I had a couple questions.
And it's the Go Beaverton, an update to the city 20-year transportation system plan. And tonight we have with us Jean Seneschal Biggs. She's the Transportation Planning Manager in Community Development. And we also have Jessica Engelmann. She's a Senior Planner with the Transportation Planning. Jean and Jessica, you take the floor.
Hi, folks. Good to see you all.
When you're ready,
Hello.
please. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me here tonight. As Jabra mentioned, my name is Jessica Engelmann. I'm a senior planner in the transportation planning section, and I'm here tonight with Jean Seneschal Biggs, my boss and the transportation planning manager. We're here tonight to talk with you all about an update to Beaverton's transportation system plan. That's the city's 20-year plan for transportation strategies and investments. And given the charge of the Traffic Commission, I think it's important to talk with you all about this project and hear your ideas and thoughts. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see a big Go Beaverton sign?
And
Excellent. So as you'll see, we're calling the project Go Beaverton. This is to help demystify it a bit and ultimately help people engage with the plan. Just a quick overview of what to expect. I know you all have had a really long night, so I have about a 10-minute presentation, and then I think we'll have about 10 minutes for questions. We'll start by taking a look at what was going on when our last transportation plan was adopted. Then we'll think about how each of City Council's 8 priority areas relate to the transportation system. I'm using this as an organizing framework because it does a great job of touching on the many ways transportation policy intersects with people's lives. From there, we'll move on to a few slides about process, and then finally, we'll take some time to reflect on what was just presented, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. So our TSP was last updated in 2010, and while this might not seem like a long time, a lot has evolved since then. If you look to the right, you'll see a BlackBerry. And in 2010, BlackBerries still dominated the cell phone market. Also, at this time, people were buying sedans. Our Max system didn't have the orange line. You couldn't tap on or off a bus. Paper fares were the norm. Ride-hailing services like Uber only existed for a year. Bike share and scooter programs didn't even exist. And Tesla hadn't become a recognizable brand yet. Thinking about big issues like climate change and racial equity, warnings were given about climate change and what would be needed to combat the effects of it, but the effects still seem pretty far off and unimaginable to most. Fires and smoke every summer weren't yet a reality. Air conditioning and air purifiers weren't a necessity. Considering racial equity and historic injustices were largely swept under the rug, leaving a system in place where historically disadvantaged communities continued to be underinvested in and overburdened. I'm providing this context and these examples for 2 reasons. One, so we understand how much has changed since the last time we took a deep look at our community's transportation system. And second, to illustrate that a lot of things that seemed unimaginable or unrealistic 12 years ago became real in a relatively short period of time. We have the power of imagination, ingenuity, and agency to change the status quo. So from here, I'd like to walk you through the direction we'd like to take the Go Beaverton project. To create a welcoming community, we need a transportation system that is accessible, safe, and respectful of all who use it, because ultimately everyone needs to be able to get to where they need to go. This means ensuring people's humanity and dignity are at the core of any transportation strategy or investment. To illustrate a dimension of this, I've included a graphic from a street design manual titled Designing Streets for Kids. The graphic illustrates why it's important for streets to be designed with children and their caregivers in mind. Because if designed in a way that prioritizes them, this allows them to access the places they need to go without worry, and eventually to move about independently. It also shows that streets are not just for movement. They are also public spaces, and this is equally important. They are places where people can gather, can pause, spend time, and play. And when we design streets for our most vulnerable community members, like children and seniors, people who on both ends of the age spectrum, who often face similar mobility issues, we are designing streets that work for everyone. Here I have a quote from Enrique Peñalosa, the former mayor of Bogota, Colombia. And in a very eloquent way, he summed this idea up, saying, children are a kind of indicator species. If we can build a successful city for children, we will have a successful city for all people. At a technical level, an up-to-date transportation system plan provides a solid foundation to make policy and funding decisions. It also allows the city to coordinate its investments with jurisdictional partners. So what is in a transportation system plan or a TSP? At the very base level, a TSP answers the questions on the screen. What do we want? What is our vision for the transportation system? What are the goals and desired outcomes that we're trying to achieve? What do we have now? And what will we need in the future? How is our current system performing based on the desired outcomes that we wish to see? Who is benefiting or who is being left behind by the system? What projects, programs, policies will help shift the needle in the direction that we want? And how will we fund our projects? How much money can we expect based on revenue forecasts and past experience? Are there other sources of funding we should explore? And what should we do first? How should we prioritize the programs and projects that we need to get the outcomes that we want? This graphic is from the Federal Highway Administration. It illustrates their safe systems approach to the transportation system, where 0 deaths and 0 serious injuries is the goal. A safe transportation system is imperative. The system both must feel safe and be safe for everyone. No one should lose their lives or be seriously injured while using Beaverton's transportation system. Crashes will never go away completely. People are fallible, we are human, people make mistakes. But those mistakes do not need to result in death or serious injury. There are ways to design a transportation system that result in far fewer devastating outcomes. Here you'll see a picture of downtown Beaverton. It was created for the Loop project, but I think it does a nice job of illustrating the importance of thinking about housing in relation to transportation. It shows the housing development that has occurred in downtown since 2015. We know our city is growing, and where it grows matters, particularly when thinking about providing a variety of transportation options for people. Providing housing downtown has many transportation benefits, as it is located near transit and is near many essential destinations, all within a short walk or bike ride when the supporting infrastructure exists. Another point I'd like to emphasize is how people's housing and transportation decisions are inextricably linked. People must get to and from their home every day to go to work, school, socialize, recreate, meet daily needs. If the transportation system isn't designed so a person has that easy, safe, affordable, desirable, those easy, safe, affordable, desirable travel options at their front door, then this can limit the opportunities that they and their families have. As we go through this project, it's our intention to take a deep look at how we can start making infrastructure investments that provide people more travel options near where they live. More options like being able to walk, being able to bike, scoot, take transit, and not just having to depend on a car to get around. This picture on the screen, there are 2 pictures. One is taken from open air Beaverton and the other is taken from the Beaverton Farmers Market. Both wonderful examples of how the public right of way has been used in creative and flexible ways to create welcoming public spaces. There are many ways a well-functioning transportation system relates to economic prosperity. First, it can contribute to the financial well-being of individuals and families by allowing people to access jobs, education, healthcare, childcare. Second, if it's designed in a way that facilitates this, it can help people save time and money, both things that can open up opportunity. Third, a transportation system that provides options is desirable and can attract top talent to Beaverton. And finally, a system that gets goods and services to where they need to go in a timely and cost-effective manner, helping all these aspects of economic development as we develop this plan. At its heart, the transportation system plan will lay out the vision and strategy for providing a quality transportation infrastructure throughout Beaverton. Here you'll see an example of what could be considered quality infrastructure, where the Crescent Trail connects to our 2 downtown MAX stations, providing excellent access to transit by foot, bike, or other forms of micromobility. And going back to those travel options, the way people travel affects individual and community health. This is something I think that we often overlook when thinking about transportation. Getting to where we need to go can actually be fun. It does not always have to feel like a burden. Active forms of transportation like walking, bicycling, and taking transit can help us seamlessly weave movement and exercise into our daily lives, resulting in improved health and well-being. And a transportation system that connects people to family and friends and community helps people feel connected to each other, resulting in improved mental and social health. And finally, environmental sustainability. This one can feel overwhelming, but it is so important. It's the one that will require us to step up, make hard decisions, and lead in ways that we haven't had to before. The way we design and invest in our transportation system will determine how big of an impact we individually and collectively have on our environment, and whether we'll have a planet we can live on in the future. I'm going to provide a series of slides with a few more numbers to help us get our head around what we're facing and why this matters. We have less than 8 years to have carbon emissions and limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Together, the world's cities are responsible for 75% of global carbon emissions. Beaverton is one of those cities. Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the city. 1/3 of emissions in the city come from transportation. And finally, I'd like to share a quote from Alison Sant. She authored the book From the Ground Up, Local Efforts to Create Resilient Cities. She recently gave a presentation where she said something that resonated with me. She said, "We have the chance to create thriving, just, and nourishing places to live, and we must. Our resiliency will have much to do with how inevitable change is taken as an opportunity. Cities remake themselves in pieces. There are massive changes ahead. Let's make sure they're the ones that we want to live with." So it's my hope that this plan can truly be co-created with the community. To accomplish this, I see many strands of engagement all woven together to get us to where we need to go. In addition to the traditional means of community engagement, we're proposing adding a new form of engagement, where we'd form a group of what we're calling transportation ambassadors, a group of 12 community members intentionally selected to represent a broad array of lived experiences, who will serve as ambassadors into the community, helping shape and implement a far-reaching public engagement process. And we have a strategy to get this project moving. We are proposing a 2.5-year project we estimate would cost the city roughly $1 million. To help with some of these costs, we will apply for a transportation growth management grant that would cover roughly 1/3 of the costs. It's a competitive process with a lot of applicants for not a lot of money, but we are hopeful we have a strong case to be made that this project is both important and timely for Beaverton. Grant applications are due at the end of July. We should know if we're successful in September. So with that, just want to pause, have some time for reflection. Did anything resonate for you? Was anything missing? Do you have any other feedback? I'm happy to leave this slide up, or I can take it down if you prefer to see each other in a larger screen.
I think it's good to leave the slide up. I have a question. I'll go first.
Thank you.
I think one thing I'm really curious about the city of Beaverton's vision or opinion. Right now, public transit rely on TriMet. You know, we have the Metro and TriMet for all 3 counties, but is city of Beaverton interested in having its own microtransit or transportation options separate from TriMet?
Right now, Washington County there is a separate transit study being done with Washington County looking at what the options are in a larger scale. And I think that's the place where a lot of this will come in. I recognize what you're saying, you know, is there something that's more local? The city has been advocating for shuttle service, particularly down in the South Cooper Mountain area. And that's a different type of service outside of TriMet. We know that there are other places. Forest Grove has shuttle service. There are other places that have things like that. If that's what you're referring to.
Partially, I think more on, and I'll add to that. I know a lot of cities, sometimes they're business funded for like a shopping district, like just microtransit, like a state or city funded TNC, like a Uber or Lyft, where it's in a very specific area. So it's on demand, microtransit, it's multimodal. You can connect between TriMet, you know, transit centers to specific. So it could be like the Loop, it could be like, you know, Cooper Mountain, it could be specific areas, or it could just be a very small area to provide those alternatives to having, you know, some people like even in the Loop, you know, they drive in one area and then they drive to the other part of the Loop. I'm just curious if the city is interested. I know there's like FTA grants. Most of those grants go to transit districts, but in cities or counties or states, there could be also funding, you know, and I would say like a 3-mile radius, like a small, very focused type of transit versus a larger, you know, from one part of Beaverton to the other.
I would just say nothing is off the table, but we also know that there are certain types of transit service that work well for certain areas, right? And so usually in areas that have the supportive land uses and density and infrastructure, walking and biking, it makes sense to have transit service provided by TriMet because they have that critical mass. Like they are well structured for that. They are not well structured to serve outer areas. To do that in a cost-effective way where they would even consider it, and that's where some of those other types of services. So I think it is a complicated question. Nothing's off the table, and in places like the Loop, I would just consider, like in the downtown area, we are very transit rich right now. And it's one of those things where we just have a conversation about like what is preventing, what are the base problems preventing people wanting to walk from one place to the other? Is that something that should be solved with another vehicle, or is that something that should be solved by, I don't know, better pedestrian, so I think it's a bigger conversation, but I totally appreciate what you're saying. And I just want to emphasize nothing's off the table.
Exactly. I think you answered my question. I think the last thing I'll say is like the Nike employee shuttle. There's 25 different little Nike buildings and they have their own employee. It's obviously business funded. And that reduces, commute, a lot of vehicles or employees driving to and from work, they use the shuttle. So I'm just thinking more in the core of Beaverton or like Cooper Mountain connecting. I think that would definitely be an opportunity for, ride share, even if it's city funded carpooling type of programs. I think those are things that I would, recommend more looking into. Thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful. And there are things, going beyond that, I just emphasize that the concept of mobility hubs, where you do have that interchange between different modes, ride sharing, car, bike, scooter, all of that, transit is something that will be considered in the course of this project. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Urbanski?
Yeah, I mean, you gave a very nice kind of upbeat, colorful presentation. But I noticed that all of the images that you showed were of healthy looking people walking, riding bicycles, wearing shorts and t-shirts. And I just want to make sure that you do realize that it rains a lot here in Oregon, in Portland. And all your pictures like perfect summer's day, but also in the winter time, it's cold. A lot of people don't want to ride their bicycles or are unable to ride their bicycles. Let's say they're old or they don't have the health to ride a bicycle, particularly when it's wet or cold. And other people have children, they can't take a child in the back of a bicycle very easily, especially if they've got twins, let's say. Or if they need to go to Costco or anywhere to buy, groceries for the week or, any bulky items. So I just, because you didn't kind of mention those kind of ways of looking at transportation, and you're kind of presenting a very ideal summer's day. So I just want to make sure that all those other things are not being overlooked,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I just want to emphasize that cars aren't going away in this place. They have a place in the system, and we know that they will have a place in people's mobility, the suite of options that they have, right? There is no one tool, one mode that fits every trip that a person needs to take. I mean, but I will say that we also know for the past 70 plus years that we have really the car has had really an exclusive place in our thinking and in the way that we've designed our systems and our communities. And it's resulted in us having to be overly dependent on that. So while I think it's in the toolbox, they're not going away. We have developed in a way that has been very car dependent. The idea is to shift to be less dependent, right? And provide options, because right now we have a pretty blunt tool.
That's given people freedom, though. I think a lot of people will be very resistant to losing that freedom, especially if
I'm not talking about losing freedom,
if they're electrified, then the impact on the climate won't be as severe as, cars are having right now. So if all the cars were electric, then wouldn't it be good that people would have that independence and the freedom and not pollute?
You're absolutely right. Electrification is something that we really want to go towards, but electrification will not get us to where we need to be alone. So it's a two-prong strategy. We know that is a fact. We cannot get to where we need to be with just electrification. We actually need to become less dependent for some of those shorter trips, and there are a lot of other benefits that do result from that. And we've built a system that hasn't really allowed for that at this point. And this is a 20-year plan, and we have a lot of work to do. So I would like to start off on a positive note and look at what might be possible.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Bobadilla.
Hi, Jessica.
Hello.
We are all positive. That's why we're here, just so hopefully you're not getting discouraged with some of our feedback here, but we're being realistic too. We live in suburbia land. We love our cars. We're not Portland. And even when people come here and talk to us and tell us about that, we hear about their concerns because they still like their cars and we love our cars. So even though we want to be, I get it, we're all moving to try and be more greener and we all have these goals that we need to meet. But at the same time, we can't ignore the reality. So I ask that please continue to keep that in mind. I understand there's goals, but we also need to keep the reality in perspective. There's also, you mentioned there's going to be a place for cars. I almost feel like there's going to be an elimination of the opportunities for people to continue to have their cars, that we're pushing it more that way. It's not. I actually think that this whole green that is happening, that it seems to be that more people are actually buying cars now because, you know, they're electric and they're going to be less harmful to the environment. And more people are actually getting encouraged to buy their new car in that way. So parking is huge. Please put it somewhere in there. Don't forget about it. It becomes, again, a problem, which then becomes a safety problem also, which then becomes a problem that nobody wants to go to downtown then. There's a huge investment that's been happening over the years. I've been living in Beaverton for now 20 years and I've seen it evolve. Yes, there's been a lot of changes, the last change, but the 20 years has been huge. And Beaverton is thriving in downtown, but it's because it's still accessible to a degree. If we start pushing certain things over that, it's not going to be accessible. I would also ask that the other thing is, I think motorized scooters or the little bikes and all these are coming. We got to find a place for them. They're becoming much more. That's probably going to be one of the ways of how people are going to get from small connection areas here within. We need to maybe think about how do they fit in and how do we make space for them so they can be accommodated on the roads, on parking, wherever it ends up being there. Even on buses in the future. So they can take the small route and they can get on the bus and get onto a longer route, just the way we started accommodating to a degree our bikes. I think that's going to be another thing that's happening. I would like to see down the road, driverless vehicles are coming. They're coming much faster than we realize and that we think, just like Uber came. Huge investments are going there. Uber, all these lifts are going to continue to invest in there. My point to that is, a lot of us, and especially the new generation that's coming up right now, the Generation Z, they are a generation where they order things and things get delivered. So a lot of quick stop, short-term type of accessibility space for those type of vehicles, in my opinion, are going to be needed. That's not going to go away. So just thank you for the presentation. It looks wonderful. It's exciting. That I love your perspective. And I'm going to steal it for the future of Build Cities for Kids.
Well, thank you for all of that. Yeah, you know, I mean, you're right. It is going to be a hard shift. I mean, we have exactly what you said. There is a reality. I live out here. I am part of this community, and I do everything, right? I also own a car. I own an EV, and that is just, I live it. I see it. It will be a challenge, but I think that we're up for it. And I think that we have an opportunity to really lead in this way as a suburban community. I don't think that it is impossible. And I just want to point out that a large portion of the population don't actually don't drive, right? Be that mean without having the financial means to do it or have the ability to do it. Again, that young, old, there's a great big part of the population that is a pretty exclusive way to get around. And I just want to keep that in the back of our minds. There is a big portion of the population that don't have that as an option. I completely agree on the micromobility scooters, e-bikes. I mean, e-bikes are just taking off right now. I think you're right on that. That is a trend that is happening. We need to be thinking about that and mindful. And yes, all the other things at the end, autonomous vehicles. I think what you were talking about a little bit on curb management, thinking about, you know, how that works with interchange with package delivery, parking, Uber drop-offs, things like that. Those are all things that we will be considering. So I hear
Well, I
you.
can
Thank you.
just, yeah, I might just add, I don't think vehicles, I'm sorry, I disagree with you in that regard. I guess it depends on, yes, there's a lot of more people that are like the elders, a certain group of people aren't driving to a degree, but we actually, the cars are on the road, there's still more of them. And they're being used to a higher capacity than they were before. Like the Uber car continues to be on the road continuously and is moving many people from one area to another some of these drivers literally drive 8-10 hours a day, and that's what they do for a living, not as a hobby. So before, it wasn't like this car was constantly seeming to be on the road. Now it's like they're there all the time. So just something that I see from the other perspective as I'm a personal injury attorney and deal with to a degree with traffic.
Okay.
Hey, Jessica, this is
Thank
Sergeant Shaw. Safety is number 3 on the list there. And I'm wondering if the city is putting any pressure on TriMet and that system to make it safer. Because honestly, we go day in and day out, we're dealing with people being victimized on our mass transit system. Is the city doing anything to pressure that system to make it safer? Because honestly, I wouldn't take mass transit. I feel like I would have to act if I was on mass transit, and I don't want to have to do that off duty. So is that a consideration the city's doing? Vice Chair brought up, micro transit, right? Are we thinking about moving to our own system outside of that larger system if we can't make that a safe system for people to travel in?
I would say that we're not thinking about moving outside of the TriMet system. The TriMet system has a very big place in our community, and a lot of our community does use it. It's good to understand and hear what you're saying about the security and feeling of being unsafe. That is important. And I wanted to emphasize that in my presentation, that it's not just about, it's feeling safe and being safe, right? I mean, it's about feeling your personal security and also literally being safe on wherever you're traveling, right? And so I hear that. I don't know what our agreements are between, you want to talk, Jean, to this? I'm going to hand this over to you.
Yeah,
and how you
sure.
want to handle it.
Sure. And really your question is more along the lines of public safety, right?
Mhm.
Which is what you do, Sergeant Shaw, right? That's directly connected with your work.
Yeah.
And so, the city does have agreements with TriMet. We have officers that serve as part of the Transit Police Division. And TriMet in recent years has made really great strides in taking a closer look at the system, who's riding, behaviors, and sort of how the criminal justice system kind of where the role is in that. They've made some changes in how policing happens on TriMet, more towards sort of, I'm going to say like rider advocates, but that's not the right term. But there's some really interesting work that I could point you to from that body of work that TriMet has conducted, and looking at how they've changed their approach to really wanting to make, they absolutely want to make people feel safe on the system. They know they have responsibility to the community. It's really critical that people ride the system, that it works for people. So I'm happy to point you to that. You raise a good point. Is our TSP update going to focus on that public safety piece? Really not. That's not the transportation policy work that we're going to be doing with this. That really resides with TriMet and with the partnerships that they have with all of the policing jurisdictions within the TriMet system. But I'm happy to share. I'll go online. I'll find that work so you can see what that's about, and talk with your fellow officers that serve on that patrol. I know that TriMet has come to City Council and presented on this topic sometime maybe last year. So we could find that presentation and you could hear that discussion as well. So
Sure, they're just limiting our ability to do work on the TriMet system for whatever reasons, right? Variety of reasons. So my concern is that our city is moving in a direction where we want people to use mass transit, and we want people to be feeling comfortable and safe on these mass transit and these things that reduce carbon footprints. I think we have a responsibility to those people to hold the other people accountable to the safety that's going on those systems. And again, I hear it and I see it day to day. I guess it would be anecdotal stuff, but I think personally, I think the city has a responsibility to do that, and I think it should be part of the system of the overarching system of what we're doing.
Great, and thanks for that. And as I said, the TSP update, that's not really the venue for that topic specifically, but I think I would expect we would hear comments from folks about just the sense of safety on TriMet. So you raise a good point.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think in the community engagement component, this may come up further. So thanks.
Great, thanks. Brad.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think, and if I misspoke, I don't want to take away anything from TriMet. I want to keep TriMet around. Like you said, they have a huge investment in infrastructure already. I'm just thinking of City of Beaverton outreach to businesses or tech companies. I mean, there's a lot of techs that do, besides like Uber and Lyft, that do, carpool, shared ride type of programs, in addition to microtransit. So not that, Beaverton would have its own transportation, but just outreach to businesses or agencies. It could be just, something as, if you use a TNC in Beaverton, Beaverton subsidized $1, or something to help promote those alternate types. I just think there are some opportunities there that would, help encourage people that have never maybe tried a TNC before, never tried certain alternative methods of transit. Beaverton would, have like a, first rides on us type of program. And then I think that would really help promote those alternates to the people that are probably, more reluctant to use some of those services.
I agree. And I think I would like to bring the programmatic side into this a bit more. Typically the TSP has been all capital projects, but I think that bringing in a programmatic side of it, like you're saying, is really important to help people understand and get comfortable and to promote other ways of getting around. So yeah.
I'll chime in a little bit too. So Brad, if you've not heard of the West Side Transportation Alliance, they are our business industry membership group that is about connecting with businesses and their employees about those work commute trips and helping people find other ways to get around other than those drive alone trips to the office. So they reach a lot of businesses in our community, not just in Beaverton, but beyond. They have promotional campaigns to help encourage people who are taking transit, biking, those sorts of things, and just really helping people sort of find ways who want to find other ways to get to work. So they're actively involved in the community. They also provide, they have partnerships with Nike and Columbia both in terms of, they have a bike share system for their employees. So they're doing a lot of really creative work in our community. And they're eager to bring more businesses into the fold with the programs that they're doing. So
yeah, I'm familiar with that. I think it's a great. I think on this, like you said, a 20-year, I'm probably thinking your optimism is contagious. I'm thinking big in the sense that, like cities that are replacing, they're cities that are providing their own internet. They're having more, they're thinking big. A billionaire in Las Vegas built a boring tunnel to have transportation. We have a billionaire in our backyard. So I think thinking big, to kind of solicit those other types of, like you said, businesses or local partners. For 20 years from now, I think, the good point, 20 years from now, oh, you still have a gas car? I think things like that, we don't know what the future is going to show. But definitely, I think these are great, discussions, and to get that community vision for the future enhancements, I think is a great idea.
Thank you.
A couple of comments, just to see included. As I go through and think of some of the things that we did, I took part in the Washington County 2035 TSP. At that time, they reported there were going to be 49% of commuters lived in the area and moved out or commuted out, and that the 2035 thought that by that time 51% would commute out. So basically it was a flip-flop, 50-50 come out, 50-50 come in. So with that in mind, when I think about some of the changes that I've seen and the situations and what you brought up here, keeping some of those thoughts in mind about how this was all supposed to be interconnected, I'd like to see more feedback and understanding of what we envision when issues like South Cooper Mountain come up with so many people. That what I heard in, I believe it was in this commission in one presentation and also an email I had with the planning, that TriMet's suggestion for transit situations South Cooper Mountain was to extend the 56 bus line. That was it. So I think that, as to Vice Chair McClean noted, we don't have any kind of we don't have any north-south transportation. The hub is designed to get people into Portland. It's designed to get them out to Hillsborough. There is no crossway. If I want to go somewhere, I have to get to Murray so that I can get the 20 or the 62. I can take the 62 in, but then I need to transfer over. The reason that the Beaverton Transit Center is the busiest transit center in TriMet is because that's where you have to, that's the only way you can get somewhere, is you have to take west to the BTC. You have to take Max to the BCT. The red line stops at BTC. So I guess when you go through those, I'd like to see more of what the understanding is with the expectation of when developments go in as big as South Cooper Mountain, that there's more understanding of what's going to happen, because you're not going to extend and widen Schultz and TriMet with one bus line. That doesn't seem like it's going to encourage the opportunities for that. One other one was that TriMet's cutbacks already with the reduction of bus lines and max lines now, considerations for how that's going to work out. And then that kind of leads to the bus program. I asked the BSD, as this commission has seen several times, we have traffic issues and congestion issues around schools during morning start and evening stop. And it is because there is literally lines and lines and lines of people driving their children to school. And when I asked the BSD what was going on, the issue was apparently parents don't feel safe walking to somewhere. So I didn't see anything in a partnership agreement. I agree with Commissioner Urbanski that there was a lot of hand waving and smiling faces. I'm not sure where that was, but I went by a school the other day. I took pictures. There were 12 bicycles in front of the middle school, and that was it. 12 out of an entire community in a school that is in a residential neighborhood. It is surrounded by homes. There are no businesses. There are no businesses within a half mile of that school, and yet there were only 12 bicycles in front of it. And I constantly watch the traffic congestion as I see cars go through there. So I'd like to see that considered in there. I don't see that really mentioned in Alliance. I know that the West Side Transit has talked about that, but we don't ever hear partnerships with schools. I think this presentation has seen that the loop was a big project, but we also had, as I've noted a couple of times, open air markets are saying this is awesome. We need to close some streets. Apparently we've got I don't see your parking discussion on here at all. There's the parking program that wants to start the metered parking in downtown. We also heard how there's going to be parking in the, to get to, everybody's going to commute to the new civic center there, the Reeser. But there's already transportation issues going on with that construction as well. And I don't see that balanced, and I'd ask the city for a cohesive, holistic view of how all of these projects are going to take place. There's the parking program going on, there's the loop program going on, there's an open air market coming on, there's now this TSP program. And I still have not seen somebody give us an overall presentation of how these all interact. And I don't really see a mention anywhere other than the loop was on the map of how those are all going to tie together. So I know it's a bigger conversation, but I just want to share those and point those out, because there are passion points when you walk by and you see people running. We had testimony that there are people that run the stop signs in front of the school on Wilson because they're in a hurry to get somewhere. They're running a stop sign in front of a school. And so there's a lot going on with transportation. And I'd like to see that all come together and go, so that the traffic commission doesn't have to deal with so many of these little things when we can deal with things at a more holistic level. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
Commissioner-
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to go to Commissioner Bobadilla, please, if you, I didn't want to take up a lot of time with that, but
Okay.
Oh,
Thank you,
were you going
Commissioner.
to respond? Oh,
if you do, please do. I just wanted to, please do.
Well, I was just going to say there are a lot of points there, so I'm just going to go through real quickly. I appreciate all of that. I think one, I'm going to start with the TriMet side, that they are beginning to restore service, and I would encourage you to go and participate in that process. Everybody, if you are interested in that, they are beginning to restore service and looking at ways to restore it in different scenarios. So I think that is a good opportunity to weigh in and provide comment on that.
We're dealing with that at the NAC level.
Okay.
As an NAC chair, I hear
You know about it.
that. I'm very aware of that one.
Okay, excellent. Regarding the buses and schools, that is something that we are absolutely going to look at, how to make areas around schools more walkable and bikeable. I mean, that's actually a requirement of the new transportation planning rule that's coming, that is an essential destination. And while we should be doing that, we will need to do that type of analysis, that it's considered an essential destination. And that is something that we need to be looking at the networks that connect to it. So yes, I hear that. And then as far as coordination with everything else that's going on, part of me just wants to like this is why we need this plan on some level too, because it provides the foundation. It provides a foundation for all of that work. And yes, we are coordinating. We do talk to each other. It will sync up, but I think one of the things that we've been missing for a really long time is having a solid foundation to work from. And so that's what this plan. That's what the purpose of this plan is. And I'll let Jean talk. Jean, did you want to say anything about the loop? And because I know that's your thing.
yeah. You mentioned the loop. It was there really to help explain that as an example of that connection between housing and transportation, right? That land use and transportation connection. The TSP is an overarching policy document as part of our comprehensive plan. It has policies. It has a list of capital projects. It has a financial forecast. It's a broad document. Is it going to resolve all of those issues that you brought up? No, it's not meant to. But will some of those issues that you brought up sort of get folded in as we think about policies? Possibly, probably yes. So hearing you talk about sort of that need for coordination, the Loop project is a capital project, right? And it's a project that is in the TSP, will continue to be in the TSP. It will need to be part of our financial forecast. And it embodies some of the principles that came through in Jessica's presentation tonight. I think just to be clear too, that framing structure is not meant to be like the scope of work. Jessica put this together based on the city council's 2-year goals and priorities. And that's a document, I'll find it and I'll put it in the link. She's reflecting back what council has said are priorities to them. And so that was the structure for this presentation. It's not meant to be the scope of work. So don't look at it and think there's things missing. Really think about the themes that are coming across here. And as we go out and do the outreach and we'll have a conversation with the community about what are our vision and goals for Beaverton's transportation system, so that we can find that path forward as we develop the plan to be that foundational document that Jessica described. So
That
hopefully
being said, thank you for giving some of the details, because it is good to get that feedback back. I do appreciate hearing what you're thinking in terms of details.
Yeah, and I
what you'd be looking
appreciate
for.
that. I appreciate that part, because when I hear about projects like HOP and you've just redistrict the entire city. You know, those are big things that the council had done, but to hear it, how they all tie together, because housing is on this list, but you know, it is the hot part of the TSP? No, but it's an impact because, as I think Commissioner Bobadilla mentioned, they're going to be, if you increase the density and you don't have the transit to support it, and you still have part of that culture, there is no way that you're not going to have some increase in parking issues, which is exactly what the parking thing said was going to go. So they all tie together, and they don't fall under the same sphere, but it will hold you to the foundation, because that's the key of how everything's supposed to work in this. So I appreciate how they're all tied together, and to hear them linked is reassuring. Commissioner Bobadilla, though, you had a comment.
I just wanted to chime on something you brought up, Chairman Conway, which was really important. Do work with the schools. Excellent point. I'm a parent now, and I've been in Beaverton for a long time. I've raised one child already, college age, 19-year-old. I understand the concerns of why I did not want my kids walking to school. And I'm from that generation where I would walk to school. It was even difficult walking my kid to go to when he was going to Cooper Mountain Elementary School because of the traffic, of all the stop. It wasn't as safe. Sidewalks have gotten a lot better, the safety and all that. So yes, the other one I would, now I can tell you, Valley Catholic Elementary School, high school, that too. There, you've got a lot of different competing interests. Now you've got businesses, they're going in, they're on the side also. You've got apartments, but that's going to even become a bigger role there. Beaverton High School is not far from there. Think about that. If you're wanting to encourage people to walk, kids are most likely going to be living there too long term. How do we encourage them? All that part even of Farmington there, it's not really safe. It's scary. I'm just telling even myself. Try biking through there also, and much thinking that you're going to want to be encourage a child to walk there. So Beaverton High School, there is a very big key there area for you to also to look at and consider. Even there is the elementary school, Valley Catholic, their private school, but they back up traffic immensely. So I would also suggest a good point is not just to talk to the connectors there of the principals and all that, but talk to the parents. Maybe I'll get the principals to allow you to be a part of one of those the PTA meetings, right? And get the parent feedback of can we encourage you? What can we do to get you to have the kids walk more? Principals can do and say whatever they want, but truly telling you, you can't get us parents on board, we're not going to do nothing. So you really want to hear from us ultimately, right? So maybe it's get them to help you get to us, get to the parents, talk to us. How sooner you get these kids encouraged and walking as early on, young children, the sooner you're going to continue to get them to be adaptable, right? So they get into the high school. I have a 9-year-old now too. So, and I would love to be able to do that, but some of that is, you're right, I'm sorry, it doesn't feel safe. And we've got cars now that are they're driving crazy these days out there, traffic for that. So, thank you, Commissioner Conway. Such great points there. Just wanted to get my points on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I just want to chime in on one thing, Commissioner Bobadilla. So the city of Beaverton and the Beaverton School District have a partnership around the Safe Routes to Schools program. Beaverton School District has 1.5 full-time employees working on that. They're embedded in the transportation department. So the people that work on the busing and the school crossing guards, they are an incredible team of, one full-time employee and a half-time employee. Jabra and I attend their monthly coordination meetings. They're constantly aware of the traffic issues. They often are connected with connecting and hearing from principals and PTAs. So we do have a good relationship with them. You're absolutely right that we want to be sure we, through the TSP, think about schools and how kids are getting to school and how parents are a key part of that decision. So I think more and more families would love to be able to have their kids walk and bike to school. And there's just some really significant barriers. School districts are very aware. And as I said, we're a partner. We've been helpful in getting some grants to fund their work. So
But I get,
Great feedback, great comments from you. Thank
yeah,
you.
you're talking to the principal jog. I guess they want that. Believe me, they want even on their parking lot to have less of this congestion,
Oh,
but you're
yes.
not getting the parents to buy in because of the deeper issues. My opinion, and again, I'm a parent, right? I'm telling, I just had my 19-year-old just went to college, hardly had that opportunity to walk unless we're going to be able to feel much safer. Have a 9-year-old right now telling you feel less safe in that regard because of certain issues. When have I been asked as a parent, hey, what are the concerns? How can we encourage you as a parent to have these kids walk? I don't care what the principal tells me, I'm telling you, it's my kid's safety. Talk to the people that are going to get you to help you meet your goals, us parents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? All right, appreciate the feedback and appreciate the presentation, the time and effort to put that together. I do know that Mayor Beatty has been working on gathering some projects and getting things coordinated and really building that. And I think City Council has come together to establish some rules and themes and guidelines, and it's been good to see. But yeah, I'd like to continue to see some presentations, bringing them all together so we can kind of understand what's going on. So thank you. Appreciate the time and definitely the effort that went in, and nice job in the presentation, Jessica. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night. Take
All
care.
right.
Thank you, folks. Good night.
Bye.
All right. With that in mind, then, is there any new business? I had one question. I have one question for Mr. Khasho, or I'd like to bring up is that was, I was trying to get down there by Schultz. I wasn't aware that they had kind of taken that all apart down in there. I'm not sure there's barriers and things. The water's still going over the top. Do we look like the sidewalk? Did they fix that?
Mr. Chair, you're cutting out.
Oh,
Could you please repeat?
let me see if this works a little better.
No, I think you cut in and out again.
How's that? Is that a little better? Okay. There we go. All right. I guess my question was Schultz Ferry with THPRD work on Fennel Creek. And the sidewalk is all tore up where the bulldozers are going across the road. There's looks kind of a mess. I haven't really heard anything about that. Or do they repair? Did somebody go out and check? Is there any kind of follow-up to that?
So you're talking about the construction on Schultz Ferry, just it's west of Cascade Avenue, right?
No, not part of the 217 work. I'm talking about the Fennel Creek Trail at
Is that Nimbus?
Schultz Ferry.
Schultz Ferry and Nimbus?
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, yeah, I guess that is in there. Yeah, where that dip. They've got a lot of looks like rock. They're bringing in some. They fenced part of that off. There's still a lot of flooding going on in there. And I wondered if they were going to fix that, but also they've torn up the sidewalk and there's big cracks in it now. Are they cleaning that for pedestrians in our walkability piece, or who monitors that?
First, Schultz Ferry is a county roadway, so they're in charge of the traffic control and what goes on it. But we could take a look to see which project is it. It could be the Willamette Water Supply project that they're adding the pipe, and because the project actually it's different phases, and they're going to continue on Schultz Ferry all the way almost to Roy Roger. That's the big pipe project. So
right.
we will check to see which project is it, and we'll bring it up to their attention.
Okay, thank you. I just, yeah, there's big cracks in the sidewalk, and I thought for pedestrians or people walking or just kind of look like they're just in the middle of it, but you know, they should be taking care of that while they're doing the work.
Yeah.
All right. Was there any other new business? Any old business then to follow up or report on, Mr. Khasho?
Yeah, we did follow up with ODOT regarding the 217 project and the Allen Boulevard. We did suggest to add some lighting, and they looked at it. There is a potential, you know, there is still a street light that was disconnected, and they said they will be reconnected the street lights to improve it. They're going to add reflectors on the barriers, which I believe they did. Also, they were looking, we mentioned they improve the driver information on 217 before you get to Allen Boulevard. Basically, it will tell you that Allen Boulevard, you cannot go east on it if you take the exit. Because right now, or at the time, the sign used to say, trucks use Denny, traffic change on Allen, trucks use Denny. What about the rest of the drivers? They didn't know that. So they'll take the exit and then they cannot make a left. So they'll make a right or make a U-turn. So they're looking into improving all these things. Some of it, it's been done, but some they're still working on.
Thank you. Yeah, that's quite a mix up in there. They've taken some of the lines out too, and there's no lines, and you got to kind of know where the barriers are going, and what used to be through lanes are now the merge lanes. So that's
The markings
that's done. Yes.
Yeah, the markings also, they mentioned the markings that they will be improving it too.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else?
I was going to say thank you for taking that, and also Officer Shaw or Sergeant Shaw, sorry, for taking those comments up there. Whatever little bit helps, and I've seen some minor improvements other, and I'm sure you guys have plenty of other things to do. So thank you.
Appreciate that. July, Mr. Khasho, is there going to be a meeting, or do we know?
At this time, we don't have any big items to bring in. We have one minor item to change the parking time limit on Crescent. But it's very small. That is it worth it to have a meeting in July? So we still have a week to know what the final agenda is. But if the commissioners feel that July, due to the holiday, we'll just cancel the meeting, that option is still on the table. So if you wish to go that route.
Mr. Khasho, did you ever get an update on the in-person meetings? I thought there was a discussion in the past, but it's still virtual, but I didn't know if there was an update.
We heard very little updates. I think the executive order was lifted. It will be lifted the end of June. And then after that, we're supposed to go back basically to the old ways we doing things. But the city still, they looked into through the process, and there is still additional month to go through it. So they're still looking at these things, potentially July or the end of July, that we will go back to in-person meetings. I'm sure there will still be some hybrid element with it somehow, but that decision is not set in stone yet.
Okay, thanks.
All right, then, unless there's anything else, sounds like you've got a week left to see if anything else comes up on the items. Otherwise, it doesn't seem like that's something that requires everyone meeting up during the holiday week, or is that? I guess we'll leave it and see what happens in Mr. Khasho.
That's okay. But my gut feeling saying it probably will be canceled. but it might not. So
All right, well, we'll see what,
I don't want to promise 100%.
no, you're right.
I'm
It's
guessing.
always good to get a good idea or some sense of general
Yeah.
what's going on. So especially find out if there really is an issue with other things. All right. I guess that's everything then. Is there anything else?
I have one thing just to ask. I think I misspoke about the final written order for the TC 834. I said it will go out tomorrow, but typically we send the final order after the commissioner basically agree on the revised final order, because I prepared the final order in to recommend basically reducing the speed. But now, since it's denied, so basically it stays the way it is. So I'm not gonna bring that final order, for the next consent agenda item, because it's already, I mean, it was yay or nay, so it's simple. So I will just change the recommendation at the bottom of the final order and say the Traffic Commission denied the request, and I will send it to the Mr. Chair for signature. And so I will send the final orders or the decision notice of the commission that it was denied. So I will do this tomorrow, so people will not get upset, say, hey, we're gonna wait another month for the final order to be signed, and then we need to appeal it. Maybe they want to appeal it to council. I don't know. So that's how we'll proceed with this final order, since it's denied. And the denial is on record, so there is nothing to change. Basically, it was just denied.
All right, then. Anyone else comments? All right, thank you for your time. It was a long meeting. It was very productive. And again, I think the dialogue and everything was just outstanding. I appreciate, regardless of the outcome, that there was definitely some good dialogue that really reflected, I think, a lot of stuff. So well done, everyone. Well done. All right, with that then, we're officially adjourned. And I guess
Happy 4th of July if we won't see each other till August or September. Enjoy.
Happy 4th and have a good night.
You too, everybody. Take
Thank
care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Stephanie, thank you so much. Nice job.